Hi guys, so this is my first time making a video on this kind of subject, but yeah, I just wanted to make this video about the Online Safety Act and sort of talk about the history of censorship in the UK, the history of content filtering systems, and how they compare to the Online Safety Act, and the way that the Online Safety Act seems to work, and the effectiveness of it, and the future of it, and how to circumvent it. So I just want to give a disclaimer that the Online Safety Act is something that is still evolving, and in some cases is not clearly defined, and it's possible that by the time you watch this something has already changed, or it's possible that something I have said is possibly inaccurate. So I'm trying to be accurate as possible, but it's also likely that something could be off, I don't know. In terms of my own experience, I was a web developer, I've been a Python developer, I've worked with the Department of Education, I've worked on systems for children specifically, so I've worked on projects like Bookstart, Bookedup, which we use in every single library and in every single school in the country. And I've developed forum software which children have used, again, in every single school and in every single library. These systems have been used. And I've also worked on loads of stuff over the years. So that's my experience. I've had front end, back end, a little bit of DevOps, and obviously like consultancy along the way. A little bit of everything. During this video, I'm going to speak from the perspective of someone that is trying to talk about as if we're just talking, as if you're like looking for a website and we're having to talk about, how to abide by the law. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of just a developer, just who I am, like how I would approach this, and my feelings about it, and not as a legal professional. So I don't know about law. I don't have the first clue about law, really, to be honest. So that part will be very weak. But I'm going to speak from the technical sort of side of how these things work and what I understand the legal implications to potentially be. So what is the Online Safety Act? So the Online Safety Act is new legislation that gives the UK government powers to identify and censor both internet users and content providers, and also influence algorithms. So in this video, we're going to talk about how exactly they can do that, and what the future implications may be. So I think to help understand the Online Safety Act, it helps to understand what we already had in terms of protection for online safety, and with a focus on children. So the Online Safety Act isn't brand new. Like, it's not like we've already had systems for protecting children, right? There's multiple laws, and there's also specific content filtering systems that are used at various different levels. Some are mandated and some are optional. So, for example, since around 2003, 2004, the UK has had a system called Clean Feed. Now, Clean Feed blocks individual content. So it blocks individual addresses. So if there's an offensive image, Clean Feed can block that image. Now, Clean Feed runs on every single residential connection, and it can't be disabled. So if you're a residential customer in the UK, you have Clean Feed running on your connection, and you can't disable it. And that will block the most serious types of content, for example, child porn, terrorism, and a few different other areas of serious content that is dealt with. So there are some limitations of the clean feed system. So the limitations of the clean feed system are that it only works over HTTP and that it only blocks single items. So it'll only block a single address. So if there was an entire website filled to the brim of CP, you would have to supply every single address to that to clean feed. It doesn't block entire domains or entire IP blocks or whatever. It doesn't block specific file types or specific address variant formats or whatever. So it will block one address only, and if it needs to block multiple addresses on a page, then it can. But it's intended to block one address at a time. So in addition to this, ISPs also have their own network filtering. So an ISP will have their own network filtering that can block addresses with HTTPS or other protocols, and it will have ISPs will have I don't fully the details about which systems different ISPs use. I'm not sure about specifically, but they will have their own ways of blocking multiple addresses, and they'll have their own ways of blocking domains, and they'll have their own ways of blocking IP ranges, and they'll have their own ways of even potentially blocking content regardless of the address, so that it could have multiple addresses, but they could still detect that was the same content. So that's the second layer of protection, and both of those they can't be disabled. So they're always on. For every residential ISP will have both of those. Now, on top of that, some ISPs also have parental filters. So some ISPs will have additional parental filters. Some are enabled by default, others aren't. So more recently, in the last few years, some ISPs are enabling them by default. For example, EE enables adult content filtering by default on all mobile connections. And you have to log into your account as the account holder and disable it. So that is the third layer of protection that we have in this country. And the fourth layer of protection is device level parental controls, which can not only block content, but they can also block circumvention techniques. So those are four different layers of content filtering and protection for children. So as we've discussed, clean feed and ISP filtering is mandated for all UK residential ISPs. Basically, pretty much all residential UK ISPs have these systems. Now, so in terms of the Online Safety Act, the Online Safety Act isn't a specific technology. It's not a specific content filtering system. It's not a specific product from any kind of corporation or company or open source community. What the Online Safety Act is a legal framework that defines how a content provider should deal with potentially illegal content or illegal content. So the responsibility of dealing with this potential illegal content is left to the site operator or the webmaster, or whatever you want to call them. And to do this, it defines specific criminal offences, and in addition, so it defines specific criminal offences, and it also defines specific new definitions of what are defined as illegal content types. So some of the stated aims for the Online Safety Act are fundamentally impossible. So, for example, one requirement of the Online Safety Act was that a content provider has to be able to scan encrypted content. So they have to be able to scan encrypted content for potential violations, right? Well, you can't scan encrypted content because it's encrypted. Now, they've said that they won't be enforcing this requirement until it is technically feasible to do so. The thing is, it just doesn't make any sense because it should never be technically feasible to do that. And so my guess is that ambiguity is that way for a reason, which I won't get into in this video, but they've likely worded it in that way to for a reason. So in terms of the new criminal offences that this act introduces, the criminal offences apply to both the users and the content provider, as far as I understand it. And so if a user commits one of these offences, then as far as I understand it, the content provider would have to give the details over to the authorities, whether that be their IP or whether that be potentially identifying information. I don't know. But yeah, so the specific criminal offences are things like threatening communications, which was already illegal, and things like epilepsy trolling and encouraging self-harm. Again, I'm pretty sure that those things are already illegal. So I won't talk about the criminal offences part, but the illegal content types part is of particular concern. So the Act defines what it calls new illegal content types. So many of these content types are already illegal. For example, child sexual imagery. It's already clearly illegal. So I don't know why they need to redefine it, but it's already illegal for a content provider to not deal with those images. But one or two particularly concerning new content types, as they're defined as, would be, for example, illegal immigration. Now, there's no definition about what they mean by illegal immigration. There's no way of knowing whether it means the facilitation of illegal immigration or whether it means the discussion of it outright. Even if you're the person doing it, even if you're the person, if you're trying to prevent it, there's no concise definition of what it means by illegal immigration. So my suspicion or my fear is that the government could use it, or perhaps will use it, they'll perhaps use it selectively to hush up talk about it when they please. But I guess we shouldn't get too much into that. But it is a fear that I think people know that they could do that. I think it's fairly common knowledge that people know that the government is up to that stuff. But also another potential risk of this is that so another potential illegal content type defined by the Act is, for example, religiously aggravated public order offences, which, again, what does that mean? Isn't that already illegal? Does that prohibit discussing? The problem is, the thing that you need to understand is that if you're trying to implement this system as a developer, where do you even begin? Because you're not going to want to risk it, and so you'll have to block. You don't know what to block, basically, is where I'm trying to get at. And so you would probably aim to be quite strict on it, and you would probably want to avoid any risk of you allowing that content in the first place. That's how I'm sort of grasping it at the moment. So yeah, many of these illegal content types are already illegal. Weapons, drugs, these sorts of things. They're already illegal. redefining them, I don't see what it achieves. But again, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know. I don't actually know. I don't actually have a clue. So I probably shouldn't go down that legal route too much. But from my personal opinion, a concern is that some of these aren't clearly defined, and that it could lead to the suppression of freedom of speech. And I'm pretty sure that most people are on agreement of that, regardless of their political views. I think that most people do agree on that. And I think that most people should definitely be fighting against this act as a result of that, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum and things like that. So in terms of how the Online Safety Act seems to work, is that the site owner is responsible for implementing the age gateway, or an identity gateway. Now, I think that sites can use an age gateway, but I suspect that they'll begin to use identity gateways instead, because age verification won't be reliable enough, and so they'll probably have to start doing identity checking. And then, of course, the fear from there is that they will probably want to go down the road of digital identification, and then they'll probably make it mandatory. So those are all major risks. So the site owner is also responsible for giving Ofcom. I don't fully understand this bit, but as far as I understand it, the Act gives Ofcom the ability to influence the algorithms that your sites may use. And so it could certainly be used to influence and dissuade people from speaking about certain subjects. So the risks of the Online Safety Act, so there's risks of this as well, is that the sites that implement these gateways and these checks, they will most likely have data breaches at some point, and anyone uploading their details will, at some point, it's guaranteed that you're going to have a data breach. And that could result in like a lot of identity theft in the future, I think. There's also the risk of fraudsters. So I think one thing that I sort of have a feeling that's going to happen is that I think that if I was in the mind of a fraudster right now, I would be loving it, because you could just create like 100 different identical sort of similar porn sites, and you could just be harvesting details non-stop, and people would just be uploading their details like it's like, yeah, I need your identity before you continue, and then they just upload it willingly, and you're just going to get so many people that do that. It's just going to be crazy. And so, yeah, it's a massive fraud vector, I think, as well. And the thing is that before all of this, they wouldn't have uploaded they wouldn't have done that. Like, they wouldn't be uploading any identification. They wouldn't be doing that before. And now they will be willingly. And the thing is that overall, it's just completely ineffective. Like, the Online Safety Act is completely ineffective for providing protection to children, which is the main alleged goal of it. It's completely ineffective for protecting children because sites don't have to adhere to this. Like, first of all, there's different categories of adherence. So if your site has over, it depends on the type of site as well. So some sites have to have these age gateways no matter what, and others have to follow different parts of the act, depending on how many visitors they have. They sit in like a different category or something. I don't fully understand it, but the point is that most of the world just won't care. Like, most of the world is just not going to care. Like, they're not going to bend over backwards for fucking Ofcom. Like, they won't care. They don't give a shit. So yeah, so outside of UK jurisdiction, I think a lot of sites will just refuse to do anything at all, and UK visitors will be able to access those sites completely fine. It doesn't matter. Like, the Online Safety Act doesn't protect anyone. It doesn't do anything. And the thing is that the worst part is that there's going to be parents out there that are like, oh, my children are protected now. Now that we have the Online Safety Act, everything is perfect. It's like, no, you've just fucked it. Like, where people would have used parental filters before, they will no longer feel the need to. So, you know, there's going to be... in a way, it's given a false sense of security. And I think that overall, the protection will be worse than if we educated people. And if people really want the government to intervene, like if people really want this to be spoon-fed to them, that they have to enable parental filters. Like, if parents are really that irresponsible that they're too stupid to do these things themselves, and they're too negligent as parents to do this, then what they should do instead is they should mandate ISP level parental filtering. And they should mandate device filtering, device protection, filter. They should mandate device, what do you call it? I don't know. They have different names depending on the device. So, but they should mandate different technologies for different devices. So they could mandate that ISPs have parental filters by default, and that could block all adult sites. Whereas the Online Safety Act wouldn't do that. The Online Safety Act doesn't come close to doing that. So if they did that, then the protection would be far, 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 far more superior, in my opinion, in terms of actually blocking actually damaging content. As it stands, my perception of the Online Safety Act is that it is more useful for blocking content on social media networks and on search engines. That's my take on it. Is that it's not for blocking illegal content, it's for influencing and censoring social networks and search engines. That's the two primary, the largest parts of this that I can see from where I'm looking, is that search engines and social media sites is where the main impact will be. And of course, even after all of this, even after all of this Online Safety Act, all of this legislation, the reality is that you can just get straight around it in seconds with a VPN. Not just a VPN, there's other technologies you can use as well. So for all the government talk of like, well, you know, VPNs, if you use a VPN, you know, you'll know better than a blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter what they do. They're out of their depth. They don't know what they're doing. These aren't tech literate people. Like, these are illiterate people. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the technologies that already exist. They don't understand the technologies that they could mandate. All they care about, all that this was about, they've pushed. I think they had one goal. Censorship. And everything else is secondary to that. The actual child safety part is near non-existent. Like, it has nothing to do with child safety. If it did, then it would be very different. It would be very different. They would use parental filters or something to actually block sites. They wouldn't just be like, well, we're leaving it to the site owner to be responsible. Like, it's ridiculous. It's completely insane. And then to say, well, it protects children, it's like, no, it doesn't. It tells people to protect children, and they can just ignore you. And the thing that people need to understand about the world we live in and the internet is that people don't give a shit. Like, people will sell guns online, and they won't give a shit. It's not going to make a difference. Another benefit of mandating or using preferring filtering on the device end is that it could also prevent circumvention techniques. So overall, you're going to get much better protection if you use device parental controls and ISP parental controls together. And if people really want to argue that the government should intervene and force these systems on people, then fine. As far as I'm concerned, fine. But do it in a way that actually makes sense. Do it in a way that doesn't easily allow censorship. Do it in a way that affects the customer directly, so that is on the customer's end, basically. So for example, an ISP filter, that the customer can then call the ISP and say, I want to disable this filter, and that's fine. Like, that's completely fine. But the way it is right now is it's useless. So the way to circumvent the Online Safety Act as it stands is you can just use VPNs and proxies or tunnels or whatever. Use anything. It's no real hindrance to anyone. It's pretty. There's nothing really worth talking about there. But yeah, in terms of my own personal opinion on this, I don't think the politicians and the lawmakers have understood what they're supporting. I don't think the politicians and the lawmakers have understood the technology. I don't think they've understood the existing systems. And I just think that overall it's just doomed to fail. I just don't think it has any use whatsoever in terms of actually protecting children or adults. And I think that ultimately, despite how it may seem right now, I think that ultimately it will fail. And the reason I think it will fail is because the internet is an open system. It's always been, the internet's always been a system that biases towards the free flowing of information. So the internet wants the free flowing information. Fundamentally, it wants that, right? You know, HTML, CSS, these are all open. They're not proprietary, you know. And the protocols, they're all open. You know, they're not. You know, these things. And the internet, in a sense, is that the internet roots around damage, right? And so censorship is a form of damage. And I think ultimately the internet will sort of I don't know, we're getting spiritual here, but like it will kind of reroute around that damage, right? And censorship is a form of damage, and it will kind of heal around that damage. And right now the Online Safety Act is kind of like just a cancer that's forming. But you know, we'll get around it and it'll be alright. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the Online Safety Act. I don't think it's going to be a major issue for people to work around, and I don't think it'll offer much protection for children either. So I don't really know what the point of it is. I don't think that the stated objectives of it are technically possible. I don't think that scanning encrypted content makes any sense whatsoever. And I don't think that anybody involved has put much thought into it anyway. It just makes no sense to me. I feel like I'm in crazy land and people are just promoting this as like it makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. Unless of course you want to censor people on social media. Then it makes a lot of sense. If you want to do that, it makes a lot of sense. If you want to censor search results, it makes a lot of sense. It's perfect sense for that. But for everything else, it makes no sense. So that's all I have to say in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.